All right. So it looks like I'm first. I thought this was bloody awesome. Something one of my friends noticed years ago is that when a cold goes around, everybody has the same cough. And when she pointed that out to me, I noticed the same thing. Go to the coffee house, you hear them, you can tell if they've got it. And apparently, this is true of COVID. And apparently, you can detect it when it's asymptomatic, and it can detect it with like some ridiculous, they're claiming like 100% success rate, which is highly suspicious. But anyway, it does make sense because you can hear the sound of the cough. And they claim the algorithm could do it better than people. So I imagine, as usual, they're probably highly overselling the success of their AI. But the idea is actually pretty good. That rather than a temperature check, which isn't really worth much of anything, and filling out a questionnaire, they ought to just make you like cough into an AI thing in order to get on an airplane or a bus or something. That sounds like a really good non-invasive way to see who doesn't have COVID before you go into some dangerous place. So I hope that works out. Because, you know, another thing that they show, which I think they, like most things about COVID, they figured out in China quickly. They make you take tests. If you take a test, they grab you basically and arrest you and lock you in some special place. You can't even go home. And then they put a second door outside the door to your place that they lock so you totally can't leave. And then they pass you food like occasionally and they tell you, tough, you're not coming out of there for 2 weeks. And that's what does it. Because if you go home, you'll totally infect the rest of your family. And the thing which is new, I think, is that a lot of people are pushing, oh, it's okay to open the elementary schools. And they're showing kids do spread it to their parents quickly at home. And this, I think, is very common. You know, it spreads among families. So the worst thing you can do is go home and hide. And of course, people do in America, where it's like the same as China. If you take the test and it's positive, then it messes up your life. How about not taking the test, or how about concealing the results? We went through all this with AIDS decades ago, when they said you can't like start throwing people in a concentration camp for testing positive for AIDS because then everybody won't take the test and stuff. But we don't seem to have resolved our plan yet. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. And this I thought was very interesting. This is how many versions, how many strains of COVID are infecting people. Blue is none at all. Red is 50 different strains infecting people. And this is around Houston. So that's what I thought. Retroviruses use RNA. RNA does not have error correction. When it copies, it has a high error rate, so it mutates on the average every 2 weeks. So there's tons of versions of it floating around. Now, most of the strains are different in a minor way that doesn't matter, but one of them is apparently more contagious because one of them is like 99% likely to infect you. And it's not the first one, it's the second one. And that is important because that's usually how these things end. Unless you actually have a functioning government like China and you actually prevent people from getting it, if you just let it race through your country like wildfire, like America is doing, then the natural way a virus burns out is it mutates into a more infectious strain that is less lethal. And that acts like a natural,
like the cycle.
Well, it acts like a natural vaccine. Everybody gets that, it doesn't kill them, and now they're immune. So nature will do what we are trying to do eventually. That's what happened to the first one in 1918. It mutated to a more infectious, less lethal form, and it became the flu everybody gets every year that only kills a small percentage of them. And we just learned to accept that.
The curve will go down when it reaches that point. But by that point, how many have died?
A lot. Supposedly about 2 million Americans will die to get us to that point if we just continue to do absolutely nothing, which is what we're going to decide tomorrow, whether we like this plan of doing absolutely nothing or whether we'd like to try a different plan.
Well, it's crazy because I was noticing in San Francisco that they've already given out the approval for indoor instruction, and they sent us out an email of the colleges where they said that they have they have all these restrictions. Like one of them is you can only have 2 hours of instruction indoors, but even in the email they said, oh well, you can apply for an exception and just get that waived and hold your whole class hostage for 3 hours inside an in-person classroom, which I think is totally nuts.
You didn't sign up for that right away? I just ignored that email. I just read and it said, if you want to teach face-to-face, let us know. And I said, fine, that's easy to deal with. To hell with that. I mean, are you out of your damn mind? My students didn't even want to be face-to-face before the pandemic.
No.
I would teach a full class and there'd be like 3 students that bothered to drive to school because why would you drive to school when you could just use Zoom anyway?
Yep.
What's the point? Now, it is kind of nice for a few of them that liked, to socialize and stuff. And so we had a small team of people like the hacking team and stuff that are into it. Yeah. But most students, unless you want to get more involved, you're better off just zooming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same thing, but I'm glad that Cabrillo hasn't gone down that path yet. They are opening for any class that has to, like the welding people.
Yeah.
Can't do things virtual, but they're not making it a priority to come back on campus.
Well, apparently the best thing you can do is just open the windows and let the air blow through.
Well, the best thing you can do is be outside.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have class.
The better thing is to just stay home.
Yeah.
That's even better. Yeah. Anyway, the thing I'm dreading, of course, is that they order us all back in the classroom, which is what's, I think, happening in K through 12. They're just ordering you back in the classroom, so they just have to quit.
Yeah, well, they can order, but I'm not gonna do that to my students or myself, so.
Yeah, and you really don't need to, because
No.
City College suffers from the same issue as like America. The government actually has no teeth. They can't do anything.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it matters, like Irvin said, for certain classes more than others. Our classes, there's no reason that people need to be there in person. You know, for some like nursing and firefighting and stuff, you probably need to be there in person.
Well, I hear from some of the students, there's some students who either have no good computer at home, or, you know, there's the steady population of students that just need help on every little step. They're just always dead. Those ones are hosed right now. I think like 50% of our students are totally unable to learn from home. And I think in K through 12, it's even more. Yeah.
I wouldn't say 50%, but they're
Oh,
more
50.
like, oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I would say the same for Cabrillo. There's quite a number of students who are struggling, even with utilizing Discord as a way for my students to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
I can still see that there's quite a lot of struggle for them to work.
Yeah.
Without going to a place to ask for help, even though they have Discord where they could ask for help. It's just different to them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people didn't get used to online interaction. Like, I think it's a generation thing too. My older friends don't like using the computer. They just want to call on the telephone. It's the only thing that feels like interacting with a human to them. Whereas I got used to using chat rooms and stuff, and it feels fine to me, but I think, you know, that's a barrier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So Liz has got the IRS. Neat.
Yeah, and
IRS is going to hack you. That's awesome.
Yes. Well, is it or is it really? Yeah. So they've decided to. ICE and the IRS have been looking into, you know, basically using malware and hacking tools as part of their investigations. And I'm not really sure why they feel that they would need to do this or this is appropriate, but here we are.
Oh well, you know, it's just an investigative technique.
Yes, I love their new euphemism, NITs for network investigative techniques. I'm gonna enjoy giving that one to Kaitlyn because it's a very bland way to describe the horrible things you're doing.
They're gonna hack Tails and Tor. This sounds pretty awesome from a technical point of view. I want to see this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. I'd like to see a demo.
Yeah, yeah. Well, somebody will hopefully leak it and we can start playing with it.
But, you know, I guess too, I see maybe, I guess I can see more of a use case for this with the IRS than ICE. And I'm just really curious, the article doesn't address it, but I'm really curious why ICE would need to use hacking tools.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, it does seem to sort of violate all like privacy rules and stuff, but
who cares about those?
Right.
No, well, yeah. But, you know, aside from that, I'd like to have the malware and start playing with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Oracle, yeah, I heard about this. Oracle's vulnerable.
Yeah, Oracle vulnerable is a 9.8 out of 10 on the CVSS scale, and apparently it's pretty easy to deploy and execute.
Yeah.
And from at least from this article, the guy from SANS is saying that right now it's at a saturation point. There's so many scans for this happening right now that those scans are starting to slow down.
So he's not seeing active exploits. So does that mean the proof of concept code is not out yet?
No, I thought it is out.
What's that? It is out?
I thought it was out.
Well, he says he's not seeing active exploits. So maybe the bad guys aren't doing it yet. It's just the researchers.
Oh, could be. But I know that there's a lot of scans for this vulnerability happening right now. So people are looking for the systems that are vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would think the bad guys would be using it, but I've noticed this before. The bad guys are often slow to adapt to technical new things. They just keep using the same old things, which I suppose is because the new fashionable thing is only good for a couple of weeks. Whereas if you just use like Adobe, Microsoft Office macros, they're going to be good for another 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Use the tried and true stuff.
Yep. All right. And so we're getting more useful attribution stuff, which I thought is good. Cyber Command is now dumping samples of the Russian malware up on VirusTotal where people can get it and really attributing it to Russia. This reminds me of when they attributed the hack to Iran recently of the emails. So it's interesting to see now that I'm getting into the attack framework and threat attribution. I'm much more interested in this than I used to be. And I appreciate the government releasing attribution information so we can understand who's doing what. And the indicators of compromise. This is the next thing I want to do. According to my CISM book, if you have a modern intrusion detection system, you can subscribe to a threat intel feed and it will automatically download the indicators of compromise from the APT groups and then pop up telling you, this is Russia hacking you, this is Iran hacking you, with the attack framework numbers. And I want to see if I can get that working in some free IDS system. That's pretty awesome.
Super cool. That sounds super cool.
Yeah, because in my IR class, we're doing that manually, but it would be nice if it was just automated. And so I'm getting into this. At first, I thought this is crazy, but there's even a book that just came out on why you need to determine attribution and how to use attribution. So that's going to be a big part of my IR class. And I think my IR class is going to move in that direction. And then I'm going to have a Windows internals class that goes into rootkits and Windows API calls. That's not even about malware. Just learning how the Windows internals works is enough for a whole class by itself. So I'm actually becoming like productive and defensive as I gradually move away from the red team, having outsourced the red team to Liz. Now getting more and more interested. The blue team is becoming interesting. It's much more difficult.
Yes.
It's less, in some ways it's more technical with the API calls, and it's less technical with this political stuff. But they're both important.
It is a lot more interesting to me too than it used to be, especially when you really get down into threat hunting. Is pretty fascinating.
Well, when you first start, I was the same as most people. When I first started, I just wanted to hack things. And it seemed awesome to find vulnerabilities and just take over boxes and turn on the webcam and stuff. This is great. And then after a while, you sort of get fed up with that. But for a while, that seemed really exciting. And then you wonder, how do you stop it? People keep asking me how to stop it. And I said, well, I have no idea. And then eventually, like now they say, how do you stop ransomware? And I'm still, well, I really have no idea. There's a couple of pathetic things you could do, like put on endpoint protection, but it's not really going to stop it. And I'm beginning to get interested in, why? Why is there nothing you could do? How do we make something that would actually work? Anyway, so NATO is worrying about the undersea cables. This is another thing I've heard for years. Almost all traffic goes through undersea fiber optic cables. And of course, you could just they occasionally get chewed through by sharks and stuff. You could clearly just, down to the submarine and cut them. You could even, in principle, tap into them, although that's technically demanding. So they're trying to figure out something to do about it. And good luck, man. I don't understand how you could possibly protect 10,000 miles of undersea cable from a malicious attack. And of course, cutting it would greatly decrease the bandwidth from your country, like a DDoS attack. But they're talking about it. Certainly, they should consider that those cables are vulnerable. And I thought this was interesting. Edward Snowden apparently got married in Russia. I can't find any details. He's sort of private. And now he's going to have a son with his new wife in Russia. And so he's becoming a citizen of Russia, which I think, I remember when he first fled to Russia, his lawyer here said, my legal advice to you, kid, is stay in Russia. Mariana Chapman. Don't come back here because I'll never get you off the hook. Because what you did is just totally illegal and I can't save you. And so I think this is fine. He's doing it. And I hope that works out for him. I don't think coming back is a viable plan. And just making a life for him in Russia is probably the right plan for the future for him.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, he totally broke U.S. law. And unless the government should turn out to be favorable to decide to call him a whistleblower and pardon him, which Trump was talking about, but I think he's not going to do it. He has no future here. And from Russia, he can like zoom into things and make comments and stuff. And, that's probably the best plan. What's surprising is Russia's putting up with him. And that's why, a large number of people figure he must be giving the Russians intel on US stuff for them to tolerate him. And that can't be proven, of course, but it's, our relationship with Russia is very strange and very important and will change a lot in the next election. That's why everybody, as far as I can tell, has just put their head down and they're waiting for the last month or two, because everything will change on this election. And you don't even know what to say or what to do or who to be friends with until this election happens. Or else it'll turn out you're on the wrong side. So anyway, Liz has got Europe's democracy challenge.
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. They're trying to push through a law right now called the Digital Services Act in the EU. And it's pretty interesting because on the surface, it's a privacy law, that's meant to help folks protect their privacy. But once you dig into it, there's a lot more to it. And one of the big things is that it's intended to limit misinformation and stop hate speech online. And sounds good on paper, but there are some issues with this. In terms of several areas. So one of the problems is that we've done this before. Germany did it like 3 years ago, and essentially they put in some pretty harsh controls where you've got to remove anything that's considered hate speech within 24 hours, or you get really steep fines. And one of the issues with this is you're essentially shifting the power to decide what's misinformation and what's hate speech to companies and corporations. So that's kind of a slippery slope. And, it's definitely a problem, but we don't really know what the best way to fix it is. So throwing more laws at it might not be the best way to go. Just yet, because it didn't really work out so hot when the Germans tried it. So hopefully they're improving on it a little bit. And one of the other major problems is that it doesn't address the fact that there is a ton of pretty invasive digital surveillance initiatives happening in Europe right now. And these do not really take privacy into account very much. And so it's really, it's really not addressing any of those things. And, sometimes we need to kind of take a step back when we're forming these policies, and instead of pushing something through that sounds good on paper as quickly as possible, really kind of look at it and get people that know what they're talking about involved in developing those policies.
Well, I'd be very interested to see what Europe comes up with. I think there is no chance of any of this happening in America because the two sides have total different answers. I mean, the right wing wants to publish absolute complete lies like fake science, and the left really doesn't. And so our government is just paralyzed, as it is on almost all issues. So we can guarantee that the federal government will just do absolutely nothing here. They can't do anything.
Yeah, though I think it's happening in a de facto sense on social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook.
What's being blocked? Twitter's blocked a couple of tweets about that Washington Post article and then decided not to. Facebook blocks like the 1/10 of the Proud Boys about 3 months after they kill people. I mean, I don't think either of them is really blocking anything, because if they block anything, all the right wingers say, you're blocking the right wingers. And so I think in practice, and that's what I like what Zuckerberg said 2 years ago. He said, look, if you government guys would just give us some rules, we'd obey them. But without some rules, I don't know what to block. And he's right. All I know is if I block anything, somebody will scream and yell and say you shouldn't have blocked it. And then if I don't block it, a bunch of people will say, well, you should have blocked it. And what do you want me to do?
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's hard. The only way to do it is have a government that actually makes rules and enforces them. Like when I was a kid, there was the comics book code. And it had rules like if you have a fortune teller in a TV show, no good can ever come of obeying what the fortune teller says because we don't want kids to believe in magic. And that might be a stupid rule, but at least there's a rule. You could now obey the rule. And now there's a rule like you can't shoot anybody with a gun. So all the cartoons have them shooting like something on the wall, which will fall down on hurt somebody because the law says you can't shoot anybody with a gun in a kid show. You know, and that's about how stupid it's going to be if they pass a rule.
Yep.
Like when they tried to pass rules against pornography, it ends up blocking all the legitimate concerns of sex therapists and gay and lesbian activists and stuff.
Yes.
It's a blunt instrument, the government, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm glad Europe's doing it. We can watch and see what happens. But in America, they're not going to admit it, but all it is about is pushing the voters to vote for my team.
Yeah.
That's all these laws really are, is rigging the vote.
Right.
And of course, both sides are unhappy with that, but that's all either side really wants.
Yep, it's true.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's encrypt.
This is an interesting article, kind of long, but it talks about the Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt going with its own cert and the new expiration dates for their certs. Because remember, it used to be more than 2 years, and now it'll be under 2 years. And how is that going to affect people who already have their certs and whatnot? So it's a pretty actually in-depth article on how the hierarchy of their certificates will now work and how they'll still handle some of the old certificates until those die.
I know this was one of the big reasons they brought out Let's Encrypt, because it turned out the whole certificate revocation list never worked. So Let's Encrypt wanted us to switch to really short lifetime certificates. And I think now they're recommending like 1 week.
Really? I haven't seen that.
So
but
you make it free to get a new thing. You make an automatic thing where you get a new certificate. So you're constantly using a new key. That would make more sense, I suppose, for security if you could somehow maintain the validity of it. But if they're going to start rotating the intermediate certificates, then I think you create a new problem. Like, are you really sure that all those are the right one? Can I start faking one of those? But anyway, that's been the move forward brought on by Let's Encrypt, is to keep constantly rotating your certificate. You don't just keep using the same one forever.
Right. Which is a good thing.
It might be a good thing. The plan was it would solve some problems, but of course create more problems.
Yeah. So there's even a diagram down at the bottom of the hierarchy that Let's Encrypt has right now since September. Right there.
Yeah.
Kind of see how they're going to support the old ones versus bringing the new ones on board and whatnot.
Yeah, I think I added this to one of my classes where you run this script, you install the script, you run it, and now you have a digital certificate. And it's from Let's Encrypt and it automatically renews and stuff. It's now very easy to do.
Yep.
So that's a good thing. By making it free to be HTTPS, they've really increased the preponderance of HTTPS. And this is why a whole lot of network scanning tools and stuff are just shot, because everything's going to be encrypted, which is probably a good thing. Yeah. Anyway, then we got, the election. I thought pretty interesting stuff about the election, although a lot of people are fed up with hearing about it, but I thought the election forecast is pretty interesting. This is the most widely respected election forecast. And what they did is they run like computer simulations, and thousands of them, and they add them up. So here's the Trump wins, which is the rare situation, how it would happen. And they explain how they did it. And here's what you have. There's a 10% chance. In 10% of the simulations, Trump wins by just barely. And Biden wins, in most of them, and some of them really by landslide amounts. So, I mean, it's pretty nice to see. Here's the probability distribution. And, that's what a lot of people are saying. This is why Michael Moore is, I think, the big champion, saying these polls always undercount the Trump voters because they are a group of people that you can't reach and you can't easily get an answer out of, and they hang up on you and stuff. And so Trump is still likely to win. And, that's what Saturday Night Live put on out, so Trump has a 1 in 6 chance of winning. That's not zero. That's not even close to zero. That could totally happen. But anyway, this is the science of it. And this is something I thought is, it turns out that the stock market falls when the incumbent loses, like 90% of the time, and the stock market rises when the incumbent wins. And so the stock market was rising, and a few days ago it fell. So apparently the investors thought Trump was going to win, and a few days ago they changed their mind, and now they think Biden's going to win. That's how they're interpreting this. So we'll see what happens, but that does sound pretty reasonable, because the whole thing investors do all day long is try to predict what's coming in the next week or month or so, and move their money in accordingly.
It's climbing back up today, so.
Okay, well, that would suggest that they now think Trump is going to win, which I think is true. I think about a month ago, we didn't know it all. About 2 weeks ago, everybody started saying Biden's going to win for sure. Then about the last 5 days, everyone's saying, I don't know, Trump might win after all. And it's because, of course, the stuff that's written here, I mean, the Republican Party, rather than actually representing a large group of people, has decided to be a minority party and suppress the vote of the rest, which is another path to victory. That moves us closer to being an apartheid nation like South Africa, but they apparently, all they care about is getting power. They don't care about any of the collateral damage they do on the way there. And so many of the Republican intellectuals are leaving the party. And here's another example, Benjamin Ginsburg writing about this, how they are engaging in outrageous amounts of voter suppression. And the thing I just saw was they have 100,000 votes in Texas from drive-through voting, and the Republican Party tried to exclude them, even though people voted, and at that time they were promised it would be counted, but they almost won. Then yesterday there was a ruling that they can't exclude them, and this morning there's an emergency court case at a higher court to consider throwing them out again. So this is going to be, and Trump has already said this, he's going to declare victory on Tuesday, and then he's going to say you have to stop counting, and he has 100 lawsuits or 300 lawsuits going on to stop all the counting at that point. And that might work. And this is, and it's not illegal. This is one way to win in America. This sort of reminds me of why everybody in the rest of the world won't watch American baseball or American basketball. I mean, because you play the game and then you stop and have a lawsuit. And then you play the game and then you stop and have a lawsuit arguing about the rules. This is the American way. And it's not exactly illegal. It's like, the other thing is, Biden has to win by 10% to win, because Democrats are at a huge disadvantage because of the Electoral College, but that is by design. We are not a democracy. We are a republic that takes the votes and then runs them through a process to amplify the rural regions so they don't get trampled by the mean city dwellers. And I grew up in rural regions. They all felt like, city dwellers are insane and they're babbling nonsense. And I'm trying to grow my corn here, and I don't want them telling me I have to put like stairs in my barn because of some handicapped people that don't even seem to exist around here. And what is this nonsense about racial minorities? We don't have any of them. Why don't you just shut up about that? That's the Trump side. I don't know. It's interesting and complicated. We're very far from just a democracy. And if we really were a straight democracy, this nation would be very different. And I know the farmers in the farm country, they feel very strongly they would not like a real democracy. Right. I don't know if they're right, but they mostly, like I heard interviews with Trump voters, they say, we love Trump because now we can have a coal mine again. And like, they want to have a coal mines when they know it's going away. They want to pollute the place when they know they can't put up with much more pollution. They want to overfish the fisheries. That's what the rural people seem to want. And I think they're wrong. They don't really want that. They're only thinking about, like, making money today.
Part of the reason for that is because it's very economically depressed in a lot of those areas, and there's no other industry and no other way to make money. And because we haven't done anything smart, like move data centers to the mountains in West Virginia. There was a company trying to do that, but our infrastructure in this country is so bad that that's been an uphill battle. And I mean, these are the kind of things where, government stepping in to actually improve things and make these shifts would be a helpful thing. But that's, if it doesn't have immediate, if a project doesn't have immediate political or pork barrel benefits, then our politicians aren't interested.
Well, this is why I'm like Andrew Yang. I think we need socialized medicine and we need universal basic income. We need Americans to be less desperate. Like 2/3 of Americans are like one paycheck away from being homeless or out of food or something, and that leads to craziness. We need to just take care of our people. We need more socialism. We need to just bite the bullet and say, forget it. This laissez-faire capitalism, where you just trample the serfs underfoot, has gone as far as we want it to go. We need to come back.
Except it isn't laissez-faire capitalism anymore, because the government's bailing out these corporations.
Yeah, what it is crony capitalism, just corruption, where the rich just exploit the poor and get richer and richer. And the stock market is dominated by how much the rich expect to get richer. And the rich, like Trump, because the top 0.1% make a bundle off of him by just oppressing the poor more.
And what's insane is that the welfare that we give to people is just a minuscule drop in the bucket compared to the corporate welfare that we hand out in this country.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yep. So we need to actually tax the rich and help the poor. So I hope the Democrats win, and I hope, Biden hands it over to the more liberal wing of the party, just what Trump is saying. I hope that happens. I hope the AOC and Bernie gang move in and implement some of these measures. They're right. Now is the time to give more money to the poor people and take some more money from the rich people.
well, and like let's look at as well. Let's look at all of the massive amounts of tax money that are already getting distributed in really wasteful and stupid ways. Because with the corporate welfare that's been handed out, we could probably pay for universal health care or close to it, and we're not really seeing a lot of economic returns yet. I mean, I guess it's early in the game, but we're not really seeing a whole lot of economic returns on that money that's been handed out to these corporations.
Well, yeah, I think that's a poor investment. I think by far the wisest investment that will return the most money all my life has been free prenatal care for pregnant women. Every dollar spent there will turn into $10 or $100 in a decade or two. And in general, I think all the money spent on preventive health care for free will save you a ton of money later. We're desperate because we're throwing our money away on foolish things like emergency care for homeless people. Well, why are they out there homeless anyway? What's going on here? Why don't you give them some place to live, some food and some health care, and then you wouldn't have to try and the COVID is spreading because we have this underclass of people that can't take a sick day, can't live in reasonable conditions. This is stupid.
Right.
We have like a feudal society with an underclass of serfs that we just treat like trash, and that is unsustainable.
We're not putting any money into schools. Like, no wonder we're getting dumber, and no wonder kids are struggling more and more as they graduate, because we have pretty much decided that we're gonna strip that out and essentially treat schools as a glorified daycare.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm hoping, and it looks like we have a 90% chance of the left taking this election, and then maybe they can actually implement some of this stuff. That would be nice. Anyway, then we got a perception hack.
Yeah, so this kind of goes. This kind of speaks to what you're talking about regarding, democracy manipulation and such. It's essentially the concept that a perception hack, wherein you manipulate public perception, is just as effective or even more effective than an actual election hack. So, and I think that that's true because essentially, what a lot of the Russian and Iranian hackers have done political parties have leveraged these things in order to either bolster their own position or hurt the other side, which they see as being the same thing.
Yeah. This is propaganda, which is, what all election advertising and stuff is. It's very effective. And I know Russia is very good at it.
Yes.
And the smarter Republicans are very good at it, and Democrats are fantastically bad at it. This is like Hillary Clinton with her deplorables thing. Democrats keep saying stupid things which lose them support. They don't seem to have a propaganda advertising arm that's effective.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the thing is too that they don't pay attention to this and don't combat it. Essentially, like with the hacked emails and stuff like that, they're just like, oh no, you're just blowing it out of proportion, or there's denial, instead of actually, being proactive about this stuff. We know it's going to happen. It happened last time. The same thing's happening again. I mean, it's, while they're good at it, they're not that creative. They just are repeating the exact same things that they did in 2016. And, this is sort of classic information warfare here that we're not really addressing on any meaningful level.
Well, this is why I like the Lincoln Project. I mean, because I'm teaching. Teaching is the same thing. How do you explain a complicated thing in simple terms so people get it? And the Lincoln Project is all about that, making a 30-second commercial that will communicate a fact to people, it's I respect it. You know,
they're pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think teaching is basically the same job as stand-up comedy, which is what Mark Twain said, I'm really a preacher. You're saying something about morality of life, but you can't say it directly or nobody will hear it. You have to make it a joke, and then people can hear it. Anyway, I'm very interested in the communication. This is why I like AOC. I like the way she communicates. She's so clear and so effective and so creative in how to spread her message. So
I did think it was funny that she referred to those Trump supporters blocking the freeway in New Jersey as a pileup of chumps. That did make me laugh.
What?
A pileup of chumps.
Well, sure, that's true. That's what they are. Yeah, yeah. I like AOC. I like the way she deals with people very much. People tell me her policies are too far to the left, and they might be, but I care mostly about her style. She treats people with respect, and she communicates very effectively. I think she's going to be president before long. Anyway, and container security, boy, we sure need some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I found this little practical guide, I was like, yep, good thing to share. It has a number of questions and a couple of best practices for people who are building container images to be cognizant of security as they go through the process of creating their containers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we all need this. Because the containers are another supply side issue. People just get these images from the Docker repositories and they don't know what's on them.
Yep, and just run them and, oh, here, it works, but don't check. Don't check, don't verify, don't anything.
Yep. No, I'm glad to see it. We definitely need like best practices here. I'm looking for one of these for ransomware. Do these 5 things and you'll be safe from ransomware. I haven't really found it. And that's what everybody needs right now. Everybody's getting ransomware. They need like a checklist that would actually make them more resistant to ransomware.
Yeah, that'd be a great
thing
to have.
That's why I want to make a project where my students take a server and make it resistant to ransomware. If I can find like some good, realistic things you can do, they should be practicing doing that. That would be a really valuable skill.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, good. All right. Any more comments?
No.
I'll stop this one.